My ability to create a lifestyle of health is being influenced by a belief system that I wasn't even conscious of. So, at the end of the day, you don't know, guys. And I think the important thing is on a journey is I wish it was just ABC. Wouldn't it be so easy? Candace, take the red pill, everything's going to be fine. I mean, goodness gracious me. But it's not. And in a way, I kind of like that. Because those that are prepared to make the effort and evolve and become the better versions of themselves, they'll reap the benefits and the rewards, and they'll make the impact in people's lives accordingly. And they'll do it humbly.
Hello and welcome to the Real Success Show. I'm your host, Candace Mama. Today's episode is a milestone episode because we are celebrating 1 year on the Real Success Show. Thank you so much for being with us along our incredible journey. And we have to celebrate with where we began, and that is with Brian Walsh, our Chief Visionary Officer. So we are going to see how Brian's interview has changed from the first time we spoke to him and now a year later. As you know, before we jump in, please make sure to like, share, subscribe so this incredible community can continue to grow. Now, without further ado, here's Brian Walsh. I cannot believe that I'm welcoming you back because it is our 1 year anniversary of the Real Success Show. Thank you for being here 1 year later.
Glad we're still here.
Me too. No, but Brian, on a serious note, we had such an interesting conversation when we started the season. And I remember you defined yourself in a very particular way back then. And I want to know now, how does Brian Walsh describe himself?
It's a year ago. I don't think, the journey is still the same for us all, Candace, you, me, and the whole team that are there to connect people on learning journeys on a global basis. I think when we look back to a year from now, it's an interesting time, actually, because there were a lot of shifts and changes happening in the market from a point of acquisition and finding people because of social media. And for those that aren't in that space or are, if you haven't recognized, there's a lot of shifts that happened in terms of being able to target people and connect with people and utilize, that kind of medium in order to bring people to us. So I think the key thing is, I wouldn't say I've changed much. The company's had to adapt and change and shift. And, I must just say, when I look and I watch so many of our podcasts, and it is an incredible experience to see people I don't know appear all the time. I'm like, who's this person? Oh, who's Candace interviewing this week? And then listening to the actual thing and going this is amazing. These people are amazing. That's a beautiful evolution, because I think as the business has grown away from me knowing everything that's going on to actually being surprised what's going on, I think is really cool, and we, to a shout out to you and the team behind you that have obviously put on some of the most amazing podcast episodes. I've seen, maybe I'm a little bit biased, I don't know, but it's an important factor. So, we wanted to expand our ability to expose, it sounds terrible, but to expose teachers or our communities to teachers that they don't normally get exposed to in a summit, which is obviously a very particular environment. And I think that we've done exceptionally well with that as a podcast. On the back of that, we've launched the community, the Real Success Network community, where we're starting to, put people in there. And I love the fact that we get to really broaden the array of people that we can share with people in terms of their journeys and their teaching. So I feel like we've evolved as a company, both through circumstances, but also through our primary objective. I feel, just 1 year older and a little bit more stressed. And, other than that, it's just great. It's great to see something work, because it really did.
Yeah. And, Brian, I love everything you said about the company and its evolution and expansion. And I think that's companies across the world, right? Every year is a new milestone. It's a new challenge. I remember on our first episode, you were really speaking about the spiritual evolution that you were going through personally as the business was growing, but you were also growing. You were also changing. You were also changing your paradigms. And I want to know how that journey's gone this year.
I think, my sort of motto is we should always be growing, right? We should always look back a month from where we are now and go are we a better person than we were then? Remember, our mission as individuals I was talking to somebody last night, and we were just talking about how in the context, she was quite religious. And so in the context of, say, Christianity, and they would talk about the golden gate, I mean, the pearly gates, and like, going to heaven versus going to hell, and that kind of like, doctrine. And I turned around and said, it frustrates me because I was brought up Christian, but like, to me, no one's going through the pearly gates. You know why? Because the greatest sin that anyone makes is not becoming the best version of themselves. We've heard so many of the great teachers teach this, Les Brown in particular, when he shares the story about all the ghosts around your deathbed. The truth is, our objective in life is to maximize our ability to produce the best result we can. It's as simple as that, to become the best versions of ourselves. And so, this is something that's a responsibility. And our job is to go and help people realize this responsibility. Not everyone's going to walk that path, and they're not going to live to their full capacity. But a lot of people in our space, and us individually, we're on a path to try and live the life in the best way possible, to live to the best capacity of ourselves, to become the best versions of ourselves, so that we can add the greatest value in whatever it is that we focused on. So ironically, so many people are out there trying to be altruists and I want to make a difference, but they're not focusing on themselves. And that's why I say you're going to get up to the pearly gates, just as a metaphorical thing, and they're going to go like, you're going down there because you did not care enough about yourself to become the best version of yourself. And, it's so ironic because people go, but I put other people first. No, it doesn't work like that. You are a machine. You are a manifesting machine. And if you did not do what you had to do to become the best manifestor, the best version of yourself, so that you can maximize the results you can make for yourself and therefore everyone else, then you're actually doing the wrong thing. Because as long as you're out there going, I want to help everyone else, but not help yourself, you're not helping anyone. But as long as you go out there and say, I want to help myself and become the best version of myself, and through that, become a contributor to make an impact in the world, you help in a lot of people. So the truth is, like, that simple journey of breaking through that glass frame that people look at, or the blinkers they put themselves on the world, and going like, this is what it is. We were talking about how people are bitching and moaning and complaining about stuff. And I mean, from 1 year ago to now, Candace, the world has got more complicated with more things to bitch and moan around, than there was before. But if that's what we're going to do, and we're going to focus on what we don't have, and we're going to focus on who we're not, then we're just going to be miserable, and we're never going to become remotely the best versions of ourselves. The truth is, just focus on what we're grateful for, focus on what we appreciate, and attract more of that towards us. And I honestly believe that our journey of self-actualization and becoming the best version of ourselves is not as much about learning and becoming wiser, as much as it is about letting go of the things from the past that are stopping us from manifesting who we could be today. And, I was listening to you on the last summit tell your story, and Tony Lister come in afterwards and talk about it. I love what he said, you came in after your story and said, I don't know if I want to say anything. I just feel like I want to absorb it. But, you were actually really passionate about that fact of like, guys, you can't hang on to stuff that's going to hold you back from being who you're capable of being. And it might sound great in hindsight to understand your story, but, the pain that you went through of fulfilling that was part of your journey in order to become a person that was stronger and could move out there and produce better results. And that's all we're trying to do. So no teacher's going to change anyone's life. You're only going to change your own life. You took responsibility to change your life in that moment, and the decisions you made on the back of that. And that's the only power we have. But boy, do teachers wake us up. And sometimes we have to hear 500 times, stop bitching and moaning, get off your ass and do something to make a better version of yourself, because that's the only way you're going to impact the world. So I think, if we look back a year ago when we started this podcast, firstly, the hundreds of thousands of people that have watched it, we can't even measure the impact that it's made. I know I've watched episodes and like been blown off my chair. So I can't imagine how many other people have actually learned incredible things by just sharing in that context. But all I want, and I wanted the message to get stronger and stronger, because like in a way, we're probably a bit more passive a year ago. I think we can start getting a little bit more aggressive, like, hey, it's up to you. So you can sit and listen and do nothing. Remember, I'm the great story of the listener who knew the stuff intellectually, but didn't do any of it. So the truth is that's pointless. It actually just makes you an intellectual junkie, and you should be depressed because you know stuff, but you're not getting anything out of it. The truth is, or you can get off your backside and go and change. And the teachers and the incredible strategies and the incredible stories, whether they just inspire us or motivate us, or whether they give us the tools in order to make shifts in our lives and however we want to engage with it, they can't make us change. Only we can make the change. So that journey is profound. So if I look back in a year and I go like, wow, there's a lot of things I've let go of. You know, there's a lot of things I've become aware of, because that's often the first stage to making shift and change. You know, it's not like, ooh, got a problem, fix it tomorrow. It's like, wait a minute, there's some habitual issues here. There's some process issues here that they seem a little bit off, and like, let me go and explore. Let me talk to people. Let me work with this person, work with that person, read this book, contemplate, meditate, do whatever until we start to find a pattern. And then it makes sense to make a shift and a change. It's just it's a journey, right? It's truly a journey. There's no destination to that outcome. And that's been my experience in this last year. We've felt a lot of growing pains trying to grow a large, substantial business that, for anyone that hasn't done it, is not as easy as it sounds. But from a personal perspective, so much has shifted in how I view the world. And, you know, I'm not like, my health has become a big factor. And now finally, I feel like I'm emphasizing that in my life. And that's the thing, guys. Like DeMartini often talks about the 7 areas of life. You know, like you might be cruising in 3 of them, you know, but then we got to look at it and say, wait, you know, have we got a decent spiritual connection? Are we in a vocation that we absolutely love? How's the quality of our relationships? You know, how's our health? What are the things that we need to work on? It's a never-ending story. So yeah, I've had an amazing year in that way, and I guess there's so much to be grateful for in that context. What I love is that I'm walking the journey I'm asking everyone else to walk. It's my journey, just like yours is yours, but I'm walking it. I'm not sitting on my backside hoping things are going to change by themselves. So.
I love everything you said, Brian, and you covered a lot. One thing that I'm noticing as an interviewer, interviewing you a year later, which is incredible actually, is there is a shift in energy as to how you're communicating a message now, as opposed to how you communicated it then. Then there was a lot of like receptivity. It was like, okay, you know, the universe is working in your favor. Things are going to come into your life. You know, you just need to make some steps. And now I'm feeling a strong passion, a strong energy of like ignition. You've got to do, you've got to act. And I love both energies. But I'm very curious to know, what was the impetus for that change and shift?
I think probably the thing that drives that probably the most is my refusal to stagnate. You know, as a company, we have a vision, and it's a very straightforward vision. It's to connect 1 million people in learning journeys on a global basis. And we define a connection as a proportional investment that a person makes in themselves in their personal business development, right? So when we look at it and we go, well, there's 1 million people, and we look back and we say last year, we put 16,500 new people on these journeys. You know, we managed to convince 16,500 people to purchase a product of some sort towards their personal or development, you know, in context. And then I go like, well, that would take 61.5 years for us to achieve the 1 million. And I'm 52, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm really going to be that inspired and motivated like 60 years from now, still trying to achieve the same thing. The truth is, I'm not happy with that result from a context of we could do better, we can make more. And so this year is an interesting year because of so much evolution. I think we're still in a state of huge flux in the world, and that's, you know, echoed across our own ability to connect and what have you. But I don't want to sit back and take it for granted, to be honest. I don't want to sit back and go like, well, you know, that's kind of cool. I mean, we made $1 million profit. We can just do that every year. We'll be comfortable. It's not good enough. I want to get to that 1 million people, which is a drop in the ocean, you know, when you think about it in the bigger sphere of things. I want to get to that 1 million people in a 10-year frame. So we cannot do whatever we did last year or up until this point to get to where we are. We have to do something different in order to get to where we want to go. And I think that's the key component. So there's an element of urgency that comes out. There's an element of, you know, it's 1 year, it's 2 years, it's 3 years, it's 4 years. Oh goodness, we've only got 6 years left kind of thing. We cannot afford to slacken off. We cannot afford to you know, say it's okay. If you have a true vision and that vision is a tangible outcome, then you owe it in yourself to do everything you can to go and get that result. And we could fall into a comfort zone, But the truth is, we'll never get anywhere near the result in that comfort zone. We'll still do well as a business. We'll still get paid nicely. We'll still make some profit and some money. But that's not actually the vision, is it? The vision is not to have a comfortable life, and it doesn't really matter how many people's lives we impact. The vision is very specific to a particular goal. And I guess that there's a drive. I mean, you interviewing me in a time where there's lots of things going on and shifts, and I just recovered from COVID, so I feel like I had my break. It's like funny how the body sometimes just like I slept for like a week. It was actually not a bad thing. You know, we were like, weren't you sick? I'm like, hey, I slept for a week. Like I feel kind of energized now. But by the way, guys, that's generally if you push yourself too far, the universe will intervene with something to force you to get the rest that you need, right? But the truth is that we have to, like, I feel like now as you're interviewing me, I feel like we've got some hurdles to overcome in order to get it to the next level. You know, in order, like we could actually cruise through this year, but it's so unexciting and uninspiring to just cruise through the year. And I know you're the same. I'm the same. A lot of our senior guys are the same. Like even when we're tired, like we want a result to celebrate. And getting the same result as we got last year is not a result to celebrate, because I don't want to spend 61 and a half years trying to get my vision to become a reality. So it's that kind of stuff that, you know, makes you realize you got to step up. You know, we got to keep stepping up. We got to keep raising the standard. And in flow, everything's there, but you can, like, flow is not, it's not like you just sit back like on a, you know, on a lazy boy and that's it, your life's sorted, you're in flow for the rest of it, everything's going to just materialize. You're constantly going to be challenged, you're constantly going to be pushing the boundary and trying to keep it in flow at the same time. And I think that's the key component. So yeah, there's definitely a sense of more urgency towards me or with me and my energy to go out there and produce a bigger and better result than just what we were producing before. And in a time of turmoil, that's, you know, a time that requires a certain amount of creativity, not too much creativity, a certain amount of trust and faith. Just say hello to my dear lady who's cleaning the house behind me. But a certain amount of trust and faith in people that can be challenging to do, and a certain context to what's producing a result and what's not producing a result. And so I definitely feel like a year ago was a little bit more cruising. Now it's a little bit more, you know, we got to go and make it happen. And that's just because it's a vision driving us and not comfort.
I love that. And you did really emphasize something that I think is so important for a lot of people. And I think, Brian, this is where people struggle, which is the balance of trusting the flow and the energy to ignite, right? So some people will attend a summit, they'll watch a podcast, they'll read a book, whatever it is for them. And they'll say, like, I've done the action now, like this is all I needed to do. And now I can like cruise and go into autopilot and trust the flow of life. And what I'm hearing you say is it's not enough. It's not enough to just take one step. You have to continue to walk. For those people who are struggling with that balance, Brian, how do they start putting it into a context where they can stop being frozen by fear or by hesitancy and start taking action forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting equation because, like, you know, do you get into flow first and then sort of, you know, become more aggressive towards achieving an outcome? There's no chicken and egg scenario, right? There's no horse and cart scenario. It's like, what comes first? Well, I think the point is it's a constant energy of movement. So for a long time, I was struggling to manifest results and struggling to, you know, make a vision become a reality. And I honestly believe I got into flow. But then I'm a great believer that there's things we have to let go of. So like your story is a classic example of that. The Candace today compared to the Candace prior to the whole process of forgiveness of what happened in your life and what have you are two very different people. What is the difference? Simply that you let go of something, not that you gain something. By letting go of something enabled you to go and gain more and to open yourself up more and to change the perspective of how you saw life. And so what's first? You know, like even that context, everything's first. In other words, there's a surrender to that factor of my original story of where I realized I knew lots of stuff, but nothing was manifesting in my life. And there's a surrender to the context of you don't control it. You know, you don't even know how to say what is flow. Flow is just being authentic. Find out who you are, be true to yourself. Okay, then find out what's blocking you and go and work towards release what's blocking you. And those two things never stop. So at the end of the day, what happens first? Nothing, except that you commit to the journey regardless of how long it takes. You know, and I think this is why our job is so interesting, because a lot of people will come into our space and they go, oh, if I just had more money, life would be fine, right? So we give them some of the greatest teachers in the world to make more money. I mean, like, we are very selective of the people we put in front of our people, right? They are not just drips and drabs. They are literally hand selected because they deliver exceptionally well, because the impact they make on millions of people's lives. And we have probably the best guys in the market to tell you how to create a secondary revenue stream, how to, trade and invest if you want to, and stuff like that, and the best support mechanisms and the best guys to teach this stuff, right? But they can't do it for you. So we know statistically many people come in and do it, but they don't actually follow through. Now, here's the interesting thing. We were just talking yesterday about like our 3 top, teachers on revenue or wealth creation. And we turned around and we said, like, I was asking one of my senior guys in the marketing team, I said, if you had to recommend one of them, who would you recommend? Let's say there were 50 people in front of you and they're saying, look, we desperately want to make more money. And you got these 3 individuals, who would you tell them to go and work with? And he thought about it and he eventually said, all of them. And I said, why would you say all of them? He said, because you don't know which one's actually going to work for you. And the truth is, at the end of the day, to think that you will read a book and it'll change your life, to think that you will buy a course and it'll change your life, it doesn't work like that. I wouldn't do all 3 simultaneously. I would buy all 3 and then speak to our teams. I mean, we're actually going to set up to say, which one do you recommend I do first? And then will you delay the other one so that I can do it appropriately, like in 2 months' time, and the other one in 2 months' time? Depends how aggressive I am in context. The value is not in the incredible education and programs and things that they give you. The value is in your implementation of that. And so the truth is, you might do person A, and we know they're all brilliant, right? So, we can't say which one's better. And then you go like, well, I didn't really do anything with that. So then you go to person B and you go like, okay, this is interesting. You do a bit of stuff or whatever, but then you go to person 3 and you eventually get it, even though person A, B, and 3 have actually all said very similar things and all given you very similar tools. Why would he say that? Because his experience is that's the only time something's really shifted, So it's an interesting equation, because my original point was that people think the money is going to resolve the problem, but they're not prepared to do what they have to do in order to make more money. And so fundamentally, there's no one place to start. Just go and figure out, number one, you can be authentic. Okay. We do give you teachers and tools and people like Peter Sage and people like Dr. John DeMartini and everything that are helping you become authentically who you're supposed to be. And number 2 is find out what's preventing things from flow. But one of the things that prevents things from flow, and it's so evident now, is just complaining. Like, seriously, like I was, I've got a lot of friends and acquaintances around me. And recently I've got a lot of people and I look at some of them and I go like, wow, like you really, like you, this amazing person. So to me, everyone is this amazing being, And I mean, these are like younger people often. I'm going like, you are truly like you switched on. Like, I wish I had the mind that you had when I was like 30 years old or whatever the case might be, right? Like, that's how I see them. And I think you're so blessed, you're so privileged. But then every day some tragedy happens in their life. Every day something's breaking. Every day they're exhausted. Every day there's drama. This is like Peter Sage, other people's drama. It's like, we don't even realize that the breaks we have in our lives are not the complex things we haven't dealt with in our past. They're the stupid way we choose to view the world in the present. And when we choose to view the world in the present as challenging and difficult and full of problems, and we don't even get it sometimes. You've got like, you've had friends that say they're positive, but then all they do is bitch and moan all the time when you speak to them, but they still think they're positive. Like, guys, it's not for us, let's be clear, to tell people off on this. Okay, because number one, we make the same mistake ourselves on a regular basis, but it doesn't help to tell them off. The only thing they're ever going to get right is when they figure it out. In that moment that they're going, oh my God, I've just spent the whole week bitching and moaning about the circumstance. Now, why on earth would it change if all I'm focusing on is the circumstance, And it's their journey, it's their evolution. So how about we just focus on ourselves? Because I can't change what other people are doing. You can choose to be with them or not. Don't hang out with people that are bitching and moaning all the time, because they tend to bring you down. I've been hearing so many examples of how interesting it is that negative people can bring you down. And if you hang out with negative people, there's just no out. You will end up down with them, right? If you hang out with positive people, there's no guarantee they'll take you up. That's a choice you got to make by yourself, but you're damn side better off being positive and hanging out with positive people than you are hanging out with negative people. And guys, we all know this. The problem is the negative person you're hanging out with the most is probably you. And that's where the issue lies. What is your self-talk? What is the communication you're having in your head? What are you going on about? Because there's plenty to focus on that we have no control over. Was Stephen Covey would say, the circle of influence versus the circle of concern. There's plenty to be concerned about, but it's not going to change anything. So what can you influence? And interestingly enough, that's one of the things every individual we speak to, you can influence what you're focusing on. You can't influence what other people are focusing on. So if ever there's a time to be selective on who you hang out with, if ever there's a time, are you going to get called out by friends because you're full of shit, because, excuse my French, but you didn't want to hang out with them, or you suddenly not there for them? I'm sorry. It's time to be selfish. It's time to put ourselves first. Going right back to what I said originally, in order for us to become the best versions of ourselves, to make the biggest impact we can make on this planet, we have to become the best versions of ourselves. And if that means we have to put ourselves first, well, hello, maybe that's the whole point. So yeah, it's interesting. There is no chicken egg. There's no start with this, start with that. I'm not sure. It's a journey. Walk the journey, and don't go, I read one book. Read every book. Open yourself up to every opportunity that comes your way. I'm about to go on a retreat that scares the crap out of me. It's with one of our teachers, in Costa Rica, and it's a health retreat. And I know he's nuts. And, fortunately, he's a good friend of mine, but that, good friend is still nuts. So at the end, but you know what? I'm opening myself up to opportunity because my health was a challenge that I desperately insist. And it would be nice for it to change in 2022. It will change in 2022. All right. It's like I've made that commitment. And so I'm going to open myself up to opportunities that actually enable me to make shifts, whatever that might be, whether it's scary or not. The truth is, at the end of the day, it's your choice. I can't say that that'll change my life because it's never one particular thing. And it's not only one thing I've committed to. I've committed to multiple things. But it's a journey, and that's the important thing. And, if you wanted to shift your health, you've got to look back 3 months from any point in time and go, I'm a lot healthier now than I was 3 months ago. That's it. And the body's very forgiving like that. You can mess it up for 30 years in a row, but you can turn it around in 3 months. So I think the key thing is, what's your journey? What are you going to do about it? What are you going to open yourself up to? What are you going to stop blocking from becoming a reality in your life? What are you going to go and what identity are you going to go and actually challenge yourself to shift? And judging by your face, from that's not that easy, right? And it's okay. No one said it's easy. It's not like I'm going to change my identity now. Cool. Now I'm happy. I wasn't happy before. It's not that easy, but you can only control what you can control. You can only do what you can do. And that's the only thing that matters. And in our environment, we give you lots of people that will inspire you, kick your ass, give you tools, give you strategies, use them, don't use them, but stop bitching and moaning because you're the only one responsible. And that's, I guess, a strong message we have to put across to people, especially today. It's not a cruise and a walk in the park. It's not sit on your lazy boy and get all your alignment in place and your whole life becomes a blessed life. Is not a life where you sit on your ass and everything happens for you. A blessed life is where you resolve challenges and overcome obstacles, and those obstacles become different and better obstacles as you grow and as you produce greater results with your life, and you're grateful for them. But anyone that thinks you're sitting on this planet to sit on the lazy boy and everything's going to work out for you is going to be sorely disappointed. And again, for those that believe in the pearly gates, they're probably permanently chained. It's like, guys, sorry, you're going to have to climb over them if you want to get in because you haven't made enough effort down here. Okay, I'm being flippant and I'm joking. I'm just saying take responsibility. And I think that's the message we've got to get out there. And maybe in a way, we've exposed a lot of people to stuff passively, but it's our responsibility as well to actually really kick their butts. And some of our teachers are really good at that. We know some of them, you feel like you've got a royal ass whipping when you listen to them. And we need that. I don't know about you, but I need that as well sometimes. We need to be reminded of the obvious, and it's entirely up to us.
Whew, Brian, you covered so much there, and each of it is so important. And I want to start us off where you were speaking about, learning from different teachers. And I remember when I was studying economics, which was a big passion of mine at the time, I realized that I just wasn't getting it. I just wasn't clicking. And I studied from different teacher to teacher to teacher. Then eventually I discovered Thomas Piketty, and I read his book and it just clicked. And it wasn't because he was this mastermind and he understood economics better than everyone else. It was because I needed to learn from teacher A, B, C, D. And finally, when I got to Thomas, I was open to it because I already had the knowledge, right? So it's about knowledge stacking. It's not about one person shifting your whole life. And that's what I love about what you're saying. It's invest, because once you commit to that journey, it is going to take different forms of communication to get through to you. And someone might say something that just makes it all fall in line. And you also spoke about identity. And for me, I think that is probably one of either the most empowering or crippling things that human beings have to deal with, because identity can be formed by harsh circumstances. Like people can intellectually say, Brian, I want to be successful. Brian, I want to be healthy. I want to do A, B, C. But their identity is tied in poverty, suffering, and they've got an addiction to it. And so when we're speaking about identity shifting, it is very difficult. So what are some things that people should be looking at and understanding on their journey of evolving their identity?
It's such an interesting one. Tony Robbins is obviously famous for talking about this concept of raising standards and shifting identity. And it's such to use such a blatant but obvious example. So 2.5 years ago, if you remember my original, interview with you, I spoke about how I put myself on a journey to go and challenge my, fears of connection. And how ironically my highest value is connection, but the truth is I was protecting myself by not connecting with people and keeping everyone's arm's length distance. And so I put myself in this crazy journey that I feel so grateful for, and I don't think it ever ends, kind of thing. But in the moment of putting myself on that journey, I started to smoke, because in some weird way, I put myself into an environment that was going to bring up all the BS of my past and connections and whatever it was, right? And somewhere I had this kind of weird thinking that somewhere in that space, that crazy space, I was going to find, answers to many questions, which is probably true. The question is whether you really need to put yourself in the crazy space again. I'm not so sure. But I remember I wasn't drinking and I wasn't smoking. And then I suddenly started to drink and I started to smoke. And I remember saying, and people would say, oh, you're smoking now? And I'm like, yeah. And I'd say it's just part of my identity of what I'm putting myself through. Because in everything I could remember in terms of the trauma I'd put myself through, in terms of relationships and what have you, smoking was like a fundamental part of that identity. So anyway, so people would be going like, now health's become important to you. Like, I think the smoking's got a bit of an issue, it's like, oh, okay. And I would say to people like, no, I'm just going to stop. When at some stage, I promise you, I'm just going to stop. And people go, no, but like wean yourself off and do this and do that and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, no, cool. I'm going to stop. That identity has to change. I can't wean an identity. This is the interesting thing about identity. You can't like shift a little bit, then it's different. It is normally an instantaneous change, right? So I worked with a particular guy. We're going to bring him in. I want you to interview him as well. His name's Carl. He's a transformational NLP specialist. So he's a PhD in psychology. He's way out there. Okay. So like, some of his ideas are definitely going to be interesting for a lot of people to absorb, but we're not there to, give you a teacher that is run of the mill and everyone gets them, right? For those that are on deeper journeys, he's got some profound understandings. Anyway, he's a friend of my coach. He's actually a coach of my coach, and my coach said, like, do a session with him. So I went into the session with Carl without any expectation of what was going to come out. I understood that neurolinguistic programming, NLP, you've probably heard the term before, is, the old sort of thing that came out many years ago where you reconditioned the responses to triggers in your mind. And it was a very simple concept initially. And my introduction to this whole industry was on the back of understanding NLP, which is where you could take the fear of a spider, and you could change how you reacted to the trigger of seeing a spider or thinking about a spider, right? And you know how you could just listen to a piece of music and it could change your state instantly. So you could be triggered by external stimulus, but you could change your association to that stimulus. One of the challenges with NLP that came out down the line was, well, actually, in a time of crisis, you'd often default back to the original programming. So where you may have been able to adjust how you responded for a certain period of time, the minute something major happened in your life, boom, you'd default back. The next minute you'd be smoking again, as an example. You'd have an identity that you didn't like again. The truth is that you cannot, so transformational NLP, just out of interest, is an understanding that the source is still important. So with traditional NLP, you didn't have to go and find where the source of the behavior came from, because you could just make the change instantly by reconditioning. But the truth is it didn't last. And this is what we found over and over again. So I don't know what, and here's the interesting thing. I remember Carl saying, like, you don't know, there's no logic to what you're going to go through. Guys, on your journeys, there's no logic. You can try and figure it out. Like, everyone would ask me afterwards, like, you might have figured by now that after the session I stopped smoking. But it was like, you know, everyone asked me, so what did you find out? What did you do? And I've got a story, but that you know, the first thing, it's got nothing to do with you, meaning like it's not going to change your life, my story and what I had to deal with. But the truth is, I don't even know if the story makes sense, or I might be trying to make sense of something that I let go of that I don't fully, you know, consciously understand. All I remember, I had no intention going into the session to stop smoking after the session. I had a box of cigarettes with me. Smoking was an important part of my identity at this stage. There were hundreds of triggers and I would feel things, and suddenly I would want to pick up a cigarette, you know, especially in the evening, and especially when I was stressed, or there were certain people that would trigger me, you know, instantly to want to pick up a cigarette. And during the course of this process, my identity shifted. And I never picked up a cigarette from that day onwards. This was about almost 3 months ago. Now, here's the interesting thing. I didn't not pick up a cigarette with extreme willpower. Oh, I want to, but I don't. I want to, but I won't. I want to, but I won't. I didn't. I just never picked up a cigarette. And people smoke in front of me, and people, like some of my bad influence friends, still go, do you want a cigarette? I'm like, no, I don't want a cigarette, because my identity changed. The only time you truly give up something is when your identity goes from being a smoker to not being a smoker. I'm not a smoker. I don't smoke cigarettes. Okay. And that's as simple as it is. But 3 months ago I was, and I was for 2.5 years. Now, why is this story of relevance? Well, a couple of things. Number one, I found that some of my greatest breakthroughs and identity shifts out there have come from one-on-one therapy and working with individuals, not necessarily from being in front of, you know, Tony in a big stage. I mean, Tony's amazing at transformation, but the truth is, open yourself up, guys. And we're going to do this in the community. And I think we're already doing it. If you look at a lot of the individuals that you're now interviewing in the podcast, that offer the opportunities to work with them individually and do some pretty cool and funky, you know, exercises and processes in order for you to let go of things. So open yourself up. And I don't care if it's traditional therapy to alternative therapy to psychotherapy to, you know, alien therapy. Honestly, I don't care what it is. Because like Candace just said, that book that she might go, this is the book that I understood everything from, but it's only because she had done all these other things that led to it. Nothing that I can say is like, oh, Carl changed my life because I did a session with Carl. No, everything I did prior to the session with Carl, together with the eventual catalyst of Carl doing something, changed my life. And therefore, I can't even tell you. So don't come and ask me, what did you do to stop smoking? I'm like, I believed, I acted, I thought about it, I contemplated it, I looked at different factors, and eventually the identity shifted. I can't tell you whether it was something I read, wrote, spoke to somebody, a course that I attended, or a combination. I can only tell you that it happened on a certain date, and it happened to be after I did work with Carl. But it is not fair to say it was Carl that made the change. And that's the important thing to understand. So identity is such a critical component, because you either identify with being unhealthy or you identify with being healthy. And that's the choice. Here's the interesting thing. Only after the fact that I stopped smoking did I realize that at a subconscious level, I could never in a million years identify with a smoker being healthy. So everything I would ever try and do to be healthy prior to that time when I stopped smoking I would never follow through with, because at the subconscious level, how could a smoker possibly be healthy? Like, what's the point? You know, if you're going to carry on smoking, you might as well carry on eating badly and doing everything else that's negative. That's the power of identity. I didn't even consciously know that prior to the circumstance. I only figured that out afterwards. In other words, my ability to create health, sorry, somebody's trying to call, I don't know how to turn it off on the computer. My ability to create a lifestyle of health is being influenced by a belief system that I wasn't even conscious of. So, you know, at the end of the day, you don't know, guys. And I think the important thing is on a journey is you don't, I wish it was just ABC. Like, wouldn't it be so easy? You know, Candace, like, take the red pill, everything's going to be fine. I mean, goodness gracious me, but it's not. And in a way, I kind of like that, you know, because those that are prepared to make the effort and evolve and become the better versions of themselves, they'll reap the benefits and the rewards, and they'll make the impact in people's lives accordingly. And they'll do it humbly, because it's a journey. And mine, you know, my story means nothing. The only thing you should take out of Candace's story, my story, Les's story, and anything is we overcame the adversity and we found something. That's all that you can take out of it. And you can as well. That's all you can. Like, the actual journey that Candace walked, you can't repeat that. You know, you can't have the same experience that she had. And you can't repeat my experiences, and you can't repeat Les's experiences or Darren's experiences or anyone's experiences, because that yours are unique to yourself. But open yourself up to the change, and just get that if you, and you know, for many years in working in personal development, the most profound thing I still heard many, many years ago was that the only thing that really matters in life is self-awareness. And that simple ability to be aware that you have a victim mentality, or that you have a negative identity when it comes to money or wealth, or that you have a negative identity in terms of worthiness in a relationship, or you have a negative identity towards being healthy. That's simple. That's the starting point. And without that, you can't go anywhere until you actually get that nothing externally is influenced, and that everything internally is influenced, and that an identity you created of yourself and the stories that you associate with that identity are the reason that you are what you are. As simple as that. And that's why when Tony says you have to raise your standards, it sounds so simple. And people go to, you know, Tony's basic workshops are like 4 days on 18 hours a day. Like, well, but if all I have to do is raise my standards, just like, you know, give me the red pill kind of thing. But because it's not. Because there's a whole process you have to go. And sometimes you won't even know that you've changed an identity until you look back and realize you've changed an identity. So guys, and Candace, I don't know what to say to people. Maybe I'm not the best advert for personal development anymore, because I'm 52 and it took me to like 48 to really start to manifest major results in my life. But on the other hand, I'm a good advert because I was the great skeptic before that. And I played the stupid game of thinking I knew better and allowing my ego to take control of the circumstances. When the truth is, we're all just fallible individuals that are broken and messed up. Full stop. It is our job to go and figure out what we can fix. And we only need to fix that is influencing the best version of ourselves coming out. We cannot fix our entire lives. We've got generations and generations and generations of breakage inside our minds. These things are messed, man. But you got it. So sorry, we can, you know, you can do drugs or whatever. It's not going to work. The point is, what in here is allowing an identity to manifest a reality in your life. That's all it is. And that's your journey. And to me, never ends. And that's why, you know, you've had the privilege of interviewing wealthy, successful people. I've had the privilege of knowing some of the most successful people out there, you know, and getting to meet them, be it from a financial point of view or in relationships or in context. And I'm like, I'm sorry, none of them. I've never met a single one that thinks he knows everything or she knows everything. In fact, in most cases, there's a humility to it. There's a confidence that you've got to get through as well, that, you know, they don't beat around the bush and go, oh, I don't know, should I, shouldn't I? They're very specific in what they choose to do. But there's a humility in that they never for a minute think they know everything. In fact, a lot of them are more humble in what they think they know than the people that aren't achieving anything around them. You know, they have a humility to like, I'm just going to keep figuring this out. And I think that's the key thing to understand. So yeah, the most important last point on this is that the identity of the most successful people in the world, you have the capacity of having the same identity. As you know, Dr. DeMartini always goes on about the traits. And you look at the things you admire in people, you have the same traits that you admire in everyone else. So I love listening to Elon Musk, there's so many reels, like he's been relatively quiet now, like everyone's got something on Elon talking, and I love it because Elon is far from your average normal person, and he's South African, yes, boy. And he's like, this crazy guy and the classic crazy entrepreneur. And when you kind of listen to him, like he has this way, like he will say things like, yeah, I don't think like that. Like people ask him a question, like what gets you up and what do you use to kind of get inspired to do stuff that you have to do? And he goes, I don't really see the world like that. If something has to be done, it just has to be done. Now, the truth is, Elon is on a constant growth journey to constantly become the better version of himself. The fact that he's the wealthiest man in the world, well, he disputes that. He's quite sure that Putin's wealthier than him. But I mean, who else could stage an entire war on a country, as an individual? But anyway, the point is, and I'm making a joke, but it's not actually a joke. He's quite serious about that. The point is, it's not about that, right? It's not about the fact that he's got all this money and that kind of stuff. Do you think that he's sitting back going like, well, I'm the richest man in the world, I don't have to do anything anymore? No ways. He's like, what can I do with the resources that I've created to go and make the biggest impact on the world? Do you think he was thinking of buying Twitter because it's some social project or something? You don't even know what his reason for buying Twitter is, right? You don't even know what his reason for anything is, because he's just got this identity of being able to change and shift and do things. And he has a massive confidence in himself, and he has a massive amount of flow and energy that he puts out there. But he's no different to you. He's not more intelligent. Like he earns, I don't know, Candace, how much more do you think he's worth than you are? Like 50 times? No, I'm like, like 50,000, like 100,000, like 1,000,000 times. Like he's not 100,000 times better than you, right? He's not even twice as better than you. No one is. So therefore, wait a minute, like what does that actually tell us? Well, if you admire who he is and what he does, stop believing you're less than he is. Stop believing that he got lucky because he was, in the right place at the right time. Stop believing that he's a crook. That's why he's so wealthy. Because these are all the belief systems that actually control our relationship with money. And that's what we got to understand. So long and the short of it, it's your journey. And if you tell me in a conversation that I'm unlucky, that's the identity you choose to have. And if you tell me and maybe not even tell me, because sometimes what you tell me is BS and what you actually show is the more reality. But it's like me running around saying, I'm healthy. This is what you should do to be healthy. I'm like, this probably gives it away, guys. There's a lot more of that down there, like I'm not healthy. It's okay. Now I can beat myself up about it, or I can go on a journey as long or challenging as that might be to find a place to get to a place of health. Half of you are listening go, oh, but Brian, you should just do this, and you should just do this, and you should just do this. And I don't give it what you think I should do. Do you know how much advice? Somebody actually said to me, I suppose you get a lot of advice on how to be healthy. I'm like, seriously? I can like phone 20 people on my phone and they'll spend 3 hours telling me what to do to be healthy. And they're not wrong or right, because that identity is not me. The choice of what I've got to do is figure out how to get the identity that makes me healthy, full stop. That's my only journey. And that's what you got to understand. So guys, you can buy into what just listen to yourself. I always say, like, just put a fly on the wall. It was Eckhart Tolle I was listening to, is The Power of Now. And he says, it's actually amazing when you create a consciousness where you actually listen to yourself. You like listen to the conversation in your head. You go, oh my, like, no wonder. That's not a very productive conversation. And that's why self-awareness is the key. The fact that you realize if I'm poor, it's because I have an identity of being poor. If I'm unhealthy, it's because I've got an identity of being unhealthy. And your journey, if it's important enough to you, your journey becomes, how do I change that identity? How do I become the person that is not, that has the identity of being healthy? And that's your identity. It's not mimicking exactly what Candace is. It's not being another person. It's being yourself in your space, in what makes sense to you, in your uniqueness, in your, as much as all the challenges are the same, they're unique to your story and the way you've interpreted that story in your mind. And that's where the situation lies. So yeah, I'm going off like almost on a tangent, but what I'm trying to say, guys, is we often give you the starting point. If you listen to these, you know what I'm saying? If you haven't listened to every single podcast that Candace has done for this whole year, what the hell are you doing? Who are you missing out on? Because at the end of the day, you need to open yourself to every opportunity. And if you listen to a Tony Lister, for instance, and you go like, I like this guy, I want to work with them. You'll go down below and see where his link is, and you'll go and connect with them and say, dude, I want to work with you. Or if he's in our space, you'll go into our community and say, I want to work with this guy. I don't know what it is. I don't know what he's going to do, but I just got to figure out something that's going to shift. And it's not that he's going to fix you, but he's going to give you some of the pieces that enable you to become a better version of yourself. And maybe he'll be that Stilson person or whatever his name was, the book that you read that made the sense at the end of all the times that it didn't make sense. Or maybe not. Maybe he'll just be one of the ones in between. But the truth is, it's your journey. Get on it.
Oh. Brian, I actually feel like we just attended the best masterclass on identity. Honestly, everything you covered, I couldn't even interrupt you once because every thought pattern you led us down was like so good and it was so informative. And I want to touch on one thing because we're nearing the end of the interview. I can't believe it, but you spoke about the red pill and blue pill. And I think what people need to understand is the blue pill keeps you asleep, right? So you can go about life the way you've been going about life and no one is actually going to interrupt you. If you want to be mediocre, if you don't want to take care of your health, no one's going to interrupt you. When you take the red pill, that's when the work begins. Because as you see in the character of the Matrix, that's when all his challenges begin. That's when he has to fight. That's when he has to conquer. That's when he has to make difficult decisions. And so when you do take the red pill, you are putting yourself on a success journey, but no one said it's going to be easy. Now, Ryan, we are at the end of the interview, but I've got some rapid fire questions for you. And the first one is, what is real success to you?
We often talk about success being wealth, meaning, and freedom. And that's because we kind of categorize these three things that actually everyone wants, even though they don't quite know how to articulate it. I like to think of success as being a very cliched word, but a different interpretation of the word, which is happiness, right? Like everyone really just wants to be happy. The problem is that we perceive happiness as ecstasy. We perceive happiness as like, oh, such amazing things, like running around like some crazy person with a dopamine rush, when happiness by actual definition is contentment. Can you wake up every morning and going, I'm pretty happy with my life? Can you go to bed every night going, I'm pretty happy with my life? Can you actually reflect and live in a state of gratitude for everything that happens to you on a day-by-day basis? That's what happiness is. We make the mistake of living in a world with ups and downs. We literally have drugs that take us up and take us down. We have 100 different mental disorders that take us up and take us down. We have, it's an instinct, and wave and energies are ups and downs and have peaks and troughs. But the truth is, at the end of the day, it's not like people go like, oh, you're going to Puerto Rico. Like, yeah, that's amazing. Like, aren't you excited? I'm like, yeah, it's pretty cool. It's like, oh, you fly in first class. Like, yeah, it makes life a lot easier. It's like, but it's going to be so beautiful, and you're going to work with one of the top health teachers in the world. And like, yeah, like, wow, that's great. But if I had I'm going to do a special course. It's a long story, but it just talks about the simplicity of how the mind works. If you are super excited about a party that you've been invited to, and you're like, oh my God, it's going to be so amazing. Like the last one I went to was like the greatest thing of my life. And you go there and what's the odds of that party being really good? The odds are that you've hyped it up in your mind and you're going to go and experience it. It's not going to live up to the hype and it's going to feel like a dreadful party. And then there's other times when you're like, oh, come on, we've got to go to this dinner. I don't want to go. Like, I'm tired. Like, yeah, but we have to, we committed. Okay, all right, I'll come to the dinner. And then you get there and like afterwards, you're like, that was a pretty cool experience. I met some amazing people, We don't want to live in extremes because there's like John DeMartini will often say, if you're going to go up, you have to come down, right? Like that's how the waves work. They don't have different peaks and troughs. You don't get a high and then only a half a low. You get a high and you get a full low. So really, our objective in life is to be content, which comes from humility, which comes from gratitude, which just comes from seeing everything as a blessing, but not raving and going crazy about it, and not expecting everything to be ecstasy. It cannot be. You can live a life of contentment where you are predominantly happy and grateful for your life, or you can live a life of the occasional extreme ecstasy, but with it will come seem to be more not so occasional extreme down. So the truth is, real success is just to be happy, but not the happy that most people think happy is. And I think that's the thing that's really important to understand.
I love that. And the final question, very quick. What is something about Brian Walsh that we will not find on Google?
Oh,
you knew it was coming.
It's bigger than you think.
Oh, come on, Brian. We've had people tell us they were exotic dancers. They were, you know.
Yeah, it's an interesting equation. I mean, you know, a lot of people won't find on Google the fact that I'm convinced I failed school with 42% graduate, you know, like aggregate or whatever across the thing. I don't know how I got through. I still think my dad paid. He's alive today. He still claims he didn't pay the headmasters to put me through. But what a lot of people, and it's part of my many stories that I don't always share, but on that report card with a 40% aggregate and numerous, I don't know how you can get Fs and not fail, but anyway, there was a handwritten note from a headmaster that was written all the way off the edge of the page. You know, when you're like running out of like, and it's on this corner and like he couldn't, and I hated this guy as a child. I mean, he was not the most loved headmaster at our school at the time, Wynberg Boys High. But that note literally said that despite the fact that Brian struggles economically and economically, educationally, and has all these challenges, he did this most amazing thing by formulating an organization to the anti-cruelty to animals and uniting 3 schools in less than 1 year to do something. Like, it's so funny in a way, because if I tell you my report card, it's terrible. But if you read what's written on the report card, it's like, this is amazing. And you'll never find that on Google because I don't even know where the report card is anymore. But it's like, you know, the message from that is not, wow, Brian, that's amazing. It's like, how many times are you missing the message? How many times are you judging yourself because you sucked at school, but you actually did something amazing? You know, and maybe you're not blessed enough to have the headmaster you hated actually raving about you as an individual and what your potential is. But the truth is, I bet you are. I bet all of you are being told by the universe all the time how amazing you are. You're just not seeing it. And that's the story of my life. And the reason I'm committed to doing what we do now, because I know every one of you is amazing and can do something beyond amazing with your life, whatever that is. But you just don't hear it. You just compare yourself to the struggles of life. And that's what we want to see people break.
Wow, what a way to end, Brian. Thank you so much for everything you do with Real Success. And thank you once again for being on the show with me.
Oh, thanks, Candace. You're amazing. I love the show. I love the show. It's like I watch my own show. It's not my show. Candace, you're amazing. And thanks for doing such an amazing job with it.
That was amazing. Once again, thank you so much for walking alongside us. It is my deepest honor and privilege to serve you, and I look forward to doing it again soon.